Okay, so while this comes up, I will just start by telling you that I'll be presenting you some ideas and some also some possible pointers to some further resources and things that you can explore and use to develop some what I call openness capacity in order to be able to teach to your student in a more open way, and we'll try to see what this means in the presentation. I will, as the title says, I will mainly target university educators, so professors, lecturers. I see many PhD and so on. But of course, open education is not something just for educators. It's something also for leaders, librarians, and all the different people who work in universities and other educational settings. Let me see if this moves. Yeah, okay, so let's start first of all with the message. So when I say open education, I have here a simple definition by the European Commission. There are many definitions, as you can imagine. This is just to show that open education, as Diola was saying, is not just open access. So it doesn't just mean to release your teaching resources with open licenses. This is part of the game, as we will see. But actually, open education wants to indicate any practice, any idea, any way of doing things, any way of teaching that is somehow able to widen access and participation by removing barriers and making learning more accessible, abundant, and of course, customizable. So there is not only an access dimension there, but also a quality dimension, an innovation dimension. So we will see along the presentation that open education, in a nutshell, is much more than open access. Now, we as Giuliola was saying, open education, at least among the people working on teaching and learning innovation, is a rather well-known concept. Already in 2014, Martin Weller, a very well-known researcher in this field, was saying that Open Educator had won the battle in a book called The Battle for Open, because actually we see that many positive things are happening. So UNESCO has just released a recommendation on open educational resources. Actually, it is the first recommendation by UNESCO on ICT for education in the UNESCO history, and it is on OER, on open educational resources. There are many initiatives and especially many MOOCs. We'll see what I mean with this later on. But actually, if you go in an university classroom, even in times of COVID, so even when things are taking place online, you see that in many cases, you see resistance to share the recordings of the lesson. You see many frontal teaching practices also online. And so you see that actually the status quo is still there. And actually, why is this so? What is missing? And I'll show you now a wonderful slide, which I always use in my presentation. Actually, we think in our research group in UNIR, in Universidad Internacional de La Rioja, and I personally believe that the educators, the people who actually teach every day, are the key for this change to happen. So you can have, UNESCO, the Italian starting point. So educators are the key thing that needs to change in the educational setting for this innovation, for this change to really take place in a sustainable way. Now, so if we sort of agree with this, we need to see what do we mean by open educator. And this has been the focus of my research for a few years now. And I'm presenting to you here the who, what, and how. So first of all, let's define what an open educator is or should be. First of all, he is a person who should choose to use open approaches. So there is a choice there. It's something deliberate. And he or she should do that only when possible and when appropriate. We know that in many cases there are rules, there are copyright rules. So open education should be an helper, and the facilitator shouldn't be a dogma, first of all. And then, as you can see in the picture below, we identified at least 4 components. Again, not only open teaching content, which is here on the top right, but also other dimensions of the act of teaching. So open design, open course design, open teaching practice, how actually the teaching is taking place in the classroom, and open assessment. And if we take these 4 dimensions and we put them in columns, what we have also done is we have tried to typify, to categorize educators, different categories of educators along the different dimensions. So for example, if you take design, you have on the bottom the classic, I would say, individual designer, so the professor, the educator who is designing his or her own courses the way he has always done, so based on his experience.
I am sorry again, Fabio, we are still in the armies.
You are still in the army. Let me see. Now better?
Now still we need a peaceful army.
It's interesting. How come this doesn't? Let me unshare and share again.
I am sorry to bother, but it is a
No, don't worry.
You are referring to the.
Of course.
Okay, now it is okay.
Okay,
Can you
so
put perhaps full because we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was trying to put it full, but
it doesn't work.
Well, it does work, but then it doesn't. Then you don't. It does. So if I move now, it works. Let me see.
Yes. Now,
okay.
Yes. Thank you.
So let me just make it a bit bigger and leave it like that, because I have the feeling if I go full screen, it doesn't work. Okay. All right. Sorry for this. Okay. So I was saying basically a definition, as you can see, they are composed of 4 components, of 4 elements. And if I move on this slide, you can see the 4 elements and the different kinds of educators along these elements. So if we take, as I was making the example of the designer, so you have individual designers, the professors who are designing and creating their course curriculum the way they've always been doing. You have the collaborative designers who do this with colleagues from the same university, from other universities, by collaborating with close groups of colleagues. And then you have the open designers. What does this mean? These are educators that are sharing their course ideas, their course plans with colleagues on the web, through social media, even with students. So they actually try to open up the process as much as possible. And you can clearly see that this is not about technology at all. So to do that, you just need a Twitter account, and you need, of course, to know where to share that. But it's basically something very simple. And the same is true for content. You can see from the new to OER to the OER specialist, for teaching and for assessment. I won't go in detail on this. There are a couple of papers presenting this in detail that are coming up next. Can you see the slide now, the macro, meso, micro?
Yes.
Okay, good. So now here, just to go in a bit in a snapshot on the issue of the choice. So actually, every time an educator, but also a citizen, is deciding to share something, is actually taking a decision that is balancing privacy about the content and about the activity and openness. So you have on one side a drive toward openness. Actually, sharing is typically good, especially if we are educators. We should like to share, at least with our students. But on the other side, of course, you have a number of concerns. And actually, Catherine Cronin, who has come up with this very nice structure, you can see you have different levels, different decisions. So at the macro level, you need to decide if you're going to share something openly. At the meso level, you need to decide who you will share with. At the micro level, who you will share as. Will you share it as Fabio as a person in my Facebook account? Will I share it as Fabio as a professor, as Fabio as an activist, as Fabio as an expert? That's also is, of course, having an impact on the way sharing takes place. And of course, at the nano level is, do I want to share this specific resource or this specific idea? And actually, if you look at this in a spaces way, you can see that on one side, you have the network students. We know our students are, well, it's a common place, but they are typically networked, and it seems they are quite happy when professors are adopting open approaches. On the other side, you have the networked, the open educator, the networked and open educator, and in between, you can see you have different spaces. You have the physical spaces in the university, the bounded online spaces, typically the LMS of the university, but then on the bottom, without walls, you have open online spaces. And it is there where actually most of the open sharing is taking place. And this, I think it's important to keep in mind that, of course, the first step is to share, for example, the PowerPoints of your presentations, of your lessons, with all students of the universities. Why should you be sharing them only with the ones attending your classes? But at that point, why not sharing them with everybody? You know, you just share them openly and somebody might find them and possibly use them. Now, once we know what open educators should be able to do, we can dive into their competencies. So what should they be able to do? So how they should do these things, how this change should be taken place, and should be supported by which competencies. This comes from a research we did under the Open Game project, and the link will come later on. And you have two main areas. The first area is content, OER, again, main pillar, open educational resources, and the second area is open pedagogy. I won't go in detail now, I don't think we have the time, but this is just to show that, again, open education is not just OER, open educational resources, and is not just OER-enabled pedagogies. So many people think that once you use OER in your classroom, automatically you teach in an open way. This is not true. You can teach by using an open textbook, by using even fully openly licensed materials, but you can still design your course and evaluate your students in very traditional and closed ways. So let's have a look at these two competencies area. The first has to do with OER. I don't know how familiar you are with this term. If you want to write it in the chat, please let me know. I would be curious to know if you are aware about the OER concept, open educational resources. Basically, this is based on the use of open licenses. I guess you all know Creative Commons. You have seen the Creative Commons logo in many ways. You might have seen also these nice logos here on the left. These are the different kinds of Creative Commons licenses. Creative Commons is not the only open license out there, but it's absolutely by far the most used. And as you can see there, by adopting an open license, you as the author, and not the Italian government or the Italian law copyright, but you, or Spanish or English or whatever, but you decide how other people can use your resources. So other people can use your resource just by attributing, just by quoting you. You can decide that they can use it, but they cannot create derivative work with that, so they cannot change it and mix it with others. You can decide, and I suggest you do, that they share what comes up from this resource with the same license, so that open licenses, let's say, get more used globally. And you can decide that that resource cannot be used for commercial purposes. And if you mix these characteristics, these decisions, you see on the left different licenses. And basically, thanks to the use of these licenses, this is a very simple idea. Actually, it came up. The idea comes by Lawrence Lessig from the Creative Commons Foundation back in not many years ago, 2012. There was, of course, the education community was facing a big dilemma. On one side, the internet was making it possible really to share at almost zero cost practically every resource, but on the other side, classic copyright was forbidding this. So in Italy, to make an example, if I take a picture and I upload the picture on the web, anywhere on the web, and I don't put any license, you cannot use that picture. You can show that picture in educational setting, but in order to use that picture, you should ask me. So you understand that, of course, this is a bit restrictive. So if I upload that picture and when I upload it, I say this picture is released with a CC BY share alike, for example, Creative Commons license, you can use it. You need to quote me, but you can use it the way you want. You can use it. You can take it, cut it, change it, use it even in a commercial venture. Thanks to this, so to the idea of open license, the concept of open educational resources came up. Now, open educational resources are not just free resources. This is, of course, an important component. Everybody must be able to access open educational resources for free. But it's also important that they have permissions. They have the permissions that are granted by the open licenses that you've seen before. And in order to be actually a full OER, a real OER, a resource, and I'm talking about a full course, a book, an open textbook, a piece of text, an image, a video, a GIF, anything. So it could be anything on the web or off the web. You can also have a piece of paper, you put a sticker on that saying that you are the author, you put a sticker saying that this is released with an open license, and that becomes an OER, even off the web. Now, to be an OER, people should be able to do 5 things, the quite famous 5R by David Wiley in this case. And they should be able to do important things. First of all, to retain a copy of the resource. So they should be able to download, for example, the video from that MOOC page, from that course page, and keep it in their computer. They should be able to reuse it the way they prefer, to revise it, so to change the content of that resource, to, for example, translate it, that's the simplest, to remix it with other resources, so you can just take a piece, one picture from a presentation, and I can use that picture or that slide in another together with other things. And especially, and very important, they should be allowed to redistribute it, both the single resource and the result of the remixing. Now, with these 5 things, you understand that resources are no more closed. So this is a book, you can use it, you need to buy it, and you can use it. It's not just an open book, so a book in open access, you can get it for free and read it, but here you can do much more. Since then, and here I'm talking about, again, the last 10 years, more or less, 2012, 2013, a number of what are called OER repositories or collections have started to flourish everywhere in the world. These are websites that collect OER, where you can search by kind of license, by subject, by duration, by kind of resource, and so on. The panorama of OER repositories is a bit messy because it's not so easy. In many cases, professors just go on Google and search on Google for things with an open license. You can do that for Google search. You can search for items. You can search, for example, only for PowerPoint with an open license. And in many cases, unfortunately, this is a more effective research than the one on OER repositories. But still, OER repositories, if you learn how to use them a bit, can be really an important source of content. Something different with respect to OER, but with a lot of things in common, are MOOCs. So an open educator should know what MOOCs are and should possibly use MOOCs in the classroom. Now, MOOCs stand for Massive Open Online Courses. Again, please let me know in the chat if you have heard this acronym before. I think you have. It has been pretty common. It is pretty common in the educational sciences field. And actually, just to give you, I won't enter into the debate of MOOCs, just a 1-minute history. So MOOCs started as something very open and democratic in, I think, 2007. Those were the first experiences in Canada, and then transformed into a Silicon Valley creature with the MOOCs we know today, typically delivered by platforms like Coursera or edX or Udacity. And these are very glossy and fancy online courses, mostly based on video, that anybody can explore for free most of the times, but actually, and you can take the course, and at the end, if you want the certificate of attendance of that course, which is delivered by, for example, Stanford or Yale, or even many Italian or European universities, you can pay a small quantity of money and you get the certificate. Important to note that MOOCs are not, in many cases, open educational resources, because you cannot apply the 5R to their content. For example, you cannot just download a video from a MOOC. Typically, MOOCs content are copyrighted. And again, Also, MOOCs are not always accessible. So as being online courses, in many cases, they are accessible only for limited periods of time. Now, many people in the open education movement say MOOCs are the devil. This is not open. This is a wrong way to go. We should just kill MOOCs and so on. MOOCs are not helping, especially the countries and learners in the south of the world because they are not, open as they should be. I think actually MOOCs represents a fantastic bank of content that teachers can use, educators can use by adopting open approaches in their teaching. So of course, they are not as open as we would like them to be, but they are more open than nothing. So actually, my idea is that we should be a bit less radical in this description of MOOC, and we should actually take MOOCs for what they are. I mean, again, a very interesting bank of knowledge that educators can use in an open way. Now, what does it mean? And this is probably the most interesting part for you as teachers. Now, we have seen that an open educator should know what open licenses are and should know how to use them. It is very simple. It's like pasting a picture in a specific resource. Should know what is an OER and should know how to search for OER and how to deal with OER and MOOCs. But then probably the most difficult part is what should change in your teaching, in the way you teach to your students, both face-to-face, when time will come, we will be again in classrooms, and in online settings. Here the kickoff.
Before starting with the open educational, with the open pedagogies, there is a question from the chat.
Yes, let me.
Perhaps you will answer later on, but just
No, please, I cannot read it.
It is how to upload, how do I upload on the internet a presentation of mine as an open educational resource so that it come up on Google research as open educational resource?
Yes, now I see. Thank you, Laura. So basically, to transform a resource, take a PowerPoint, take this PowerPoint I'm using now. This PowerPoint, if I don't put any license and I upload it on SlideShare, which by the way is property of LinkedIn, so it's a proprietary platform, that becomes copyrighted by definition. It's very simple. So to transform it into an OER, I just put in the first page that small picture of the license, and then possibly also a link, if I really want to do things well, a link to that license so that people see that this is open licensed, and if they want to know what this means, they can click on the link, they go on the Creative Commons website and so on. And then when I upload it wherever, in the University of Macerata repository, in any place, on SlideShare, on my personal website, anywhere, that is an open education resource. So it doesn't, and when Google searches for it, ideally, if it works well, Google should present it to you when you are looking for openly licensed resources. So from a technical point of view, is incredibly simple. It's mostly a legal issue, let's say. Sorry, now I can see the chat. Before I couldn't, so now if you have questions, just CAF G, so I can see. All right, now here I was saying the concept is the one of open educational practices. So at a certain point, the community understood that this focus on resources is important, but is not enough. So once you have open resources, again, this is not is necessary in many cases, but not sufficient to teach through open methods. And now let's see what it means, especially what I can do through open teaching. This classification comes from this professor, Juan Alperin. I think he's a Latin American professor living and working in Canada. Canada is one of the most advanced, probably the most advanced country in terms of open education approach and visionary approaches. And actually, this professor is not teaching, is not working on open education, he's working on something else. He's working actually on open knowledge and open things, but actually he posted this reflection in a blog, and actually these are his reflections about what can you do as a professor by adopting open teaching. Now, the first thing is promoting public knowledge. And actually, every university, especially every public university, should have this as a mission. You do have this as a mission as a professor. So first of all, how can you do this? By assigning only open access readings. This seems very simple, but why should be students be queuing in the library to get that book? Why should be students illegally photocopying stuff? Why should be students spending money for a book when that book could exist or something similar exists in open access? So again, this is not a matter of spending less money for the students, but it's also a matter of passing the message that knowledge is a public good. So in this case, by assigning open access reading only or mostly, you are also giving a sort of a political message. Number two, once students have run an assignment, typically this assignment goes to the professor in the LMS or in a piece of paper. The professor is reading it and throwing it. So these are called disposable assignments. Completely useless for the world. Whilst by asking students to post them publicly, for example, in a blog that the professor can create, publicly doesn't mean on a major newspaper. Publicly can mean also in the university blog, can mean also in a semi-open environment, in a safe environment. But by asking them to post those assignments publicly, first of all, you are opening some nice open assessment possibilities, as we'll see later, but also you are teaching them, you're showing them that sharing openly is not difficult, is not dangerous. Of course, you need to know how to do it, but you create some literacy in these directions. Again, this could allow the possibility for students to give each other feedbacks openly, so not just through the LMS, nobody else sees the feedback, but for example, on a blog or on a wiki page. It's nice to see how others are commenting others' assignments or posts. And for example, you could ask students to run public scholarship assignment. For example, one nice assignment, which is more and more used, is to work on Wikipedia pages, to create a new Wikipedia page or to comment on an existing Wikipedia page. First of all, this is teaching students how to use Wikipedia as an example of a massive open educational resources, open resource. And second, posting in Wikipedia, creating a new page in Wikipedia is not easy. I don't know if you've tried, but when you start, the Wikipedia controller, the community, is typically taking your page down because, as everybody, the first times you did some mistakes, you didn't quote the thing properly, you didn't maybe put that sentence in a neutral way. And so you learn again, students would learn again how to work in the public, how to work in the open, what it means to be respectful, for example, of anybody reading this, what it means to be fair, what it means to quote properly. And it is not you, in this case, commenting and assessing, but it is the very same community of Wikipedia in this case. Then, of course, through open teaching, you can promote engagement and motivation. We have some examples of professors, not many actually, that co-design their curriculum with the students. They start with the basis of their curriculum. So we have one example comes from a professor teaching Russian literature. So she starts with the basic. This is what we need to know. But how to get there is something we will develop together. So for 1 week, students go explore on the web, read some basic documents, get a basic understanding, and then depending on their interest, they decide how to approach those learning objectives. And this, as you can understand, is increasing dramatically the agency of students. When this happens, and if the professor is able to do this, then almost all students will do great in that assignment because they feel part of the game, because they have selected the readings, the activities, even the assessment strategy. Then you have other experience of open grading and negotiated grading, where you can discuss with students openly, for example, about grading, and especially in the case of open-ended assignments. So when students, again, are in charge of selecting their own questions. I know that in countries like Italy or Spain, this is a bit of a taboo. Normally, assessment is something that the professor should be designing and doing. But again, when this is done is bringing some very nice surprises in terms of students' agencies and engagement, and also, of course, learning outcomes. And finally, in terms of co-creation, which is a key word also in the open education movement, you should try to promote as much as possible the use of the open web, considered as an open resource bank where learners can just go pick up things and use them, and of course use social annotation, that is the possibility for students to comment live on others' work through, for example, a Google document, super simple, but you also have other nice softwares like, for example, Hypothesis that go in this direction. Giliola, I'm asking you how much time do I have? It's 10:40, just to make sure.
The time you need.
Okay,
Go
good.
ahead. Yes.
Good. And I'm asking everybody, if you want to pose questions, please do as Laura, use the chat, and now I can see it, so I can stop any moment. Now we have seen that this is, I mean, can really, these small, actually, not simple, but actually not dramatic changes can really change the way not only you teach, but your students perceive their learning experience at the university. And here, I just want to show you the examples I was telling you before. So this is the site of the Russian professor. I will share the slide later. This is linked, so you can explore it. This is a tale of the experience of this lady who actually really co-designs every year the syllabus with their students. And interestingly, every year she starts from the syllabus designed the year before. So the students can change it, improve it, and criticize it, and it becomes a sort of a continuously co-developed curriculum. When we talk about open textbooks are obviously a specific kind of OER. So how do you do to create an open textbook? Let's say that you are using a PDF that you created, a book that you share with your students even without with an open access. Still, that book is a PDF, so as a file is not so easy to be changed, to be annotated, and so on. This guy and some friends, he's called Riccardo Iaconelli. He was a student at Milano Bicocca University when, together with some friends, they realized that working with dispense with notes by professors with all these materials was a mess. And so what they did, they created a wiki, very simple, so a simple wiki like a mini Wikipedia, and they started to upload these content by the professors in an open and commentable way. Other students started to use them and to improve them, and this transformed actually into a project where now professors can go in this platform and create from scratch or by using existing material their own open textbook. And then once the textbook or the chapter is done, they simply freeze it, version 1, they use it in their course, but during the course, students can still comment on the textbook through the platform. So if something is not clear or if something could be improved, students can just notice that. Or if there is a typo or just something to be updated in the text, they can do it very simply. You know, they just register here and they can really contribute to this. And again, it's something technologically very basic. It's like using actually a wiki, so simplest thing in the world, but is potentially a very high impact. This professor from Polytechnic University of Madrid is another example of an open educator who doesn't even know he's an open educator. He doesn't call himself like that. But what he did, he transformed his course on software engineering, I think it was on Java software engineering, from a course with some 50 students in the classroom into a MOOC that, apart from representing a course for those 50 students in the classroom, has been able to gather in the first 2 editions 1,800 students from all over the world, teaching them for free and openly how to program with Java. So just by, actually, it's not just by, because it's a bit, there is some work behind in order to transform your face-to-face course into a successful MOOC. You need to really rethink, destructure all your activities and all your concepts and do some serious work about your own subject. But once that is done, You have a MOOC out there. This is, I think, the #1 MOOC in terms of views and use in Myriada X, which is the Spanish MOOCs platform. Again, here, this guy did it with a 2,000 euros equipment, with a computer and a mini video camera, something very simple, and actually is now reaching thousands and thousands of students for free without undermining the work of his students in the university. Again, very simple and big impact. Last one, the one I was mentioning before, there are more and more cases of professors who are using Wikipedia as a way to assess students' work. So the assignment is, we are discussing, we are working on urban landscapes in the city of Torino. So you create a Wikipedia page on that issue, and we see how the page develops, and I assess you through that. So not only through your knowledge, but also through your capacity of sharing something publicly with the community. Now, these were 4 practices taken from a set of 24 practices that we have mapped in this Open Game project that I was showing you before. I will add the link here before sharing the PowerPoint. So if you're interested, you can browse them. These are all practices that have been selected because they are, let's say, transferable. So we didn't want to get some very difficult practices, but we tried to select easy things where you don't need to be a techie expert, you don't need to be in a particularly open context, but anybody can basically use them. A few things I suggest you could do in order to become or to explore how to work in the open. The first thing is a bit of a self-promotion. This is a platform called Open Educator's Factory. It is a platform which we developed at UNIR in my university, where you simply go there, you reply to 9 questions, very easy, about the way you teach or the way, what we've been discussing today. Open licenses, the way you design your courses and so on. You take 5 minutes, and then the platform is positioning you in the framework that we've seen before. So you can appreciate sort of how open are you in the different domains, and you can get some recommended readings and some recommended course based on your scoring in different areas. Again, this takes really a few minutes and is a good way to explore openness from your very point of view, not in general terms. Second thing could be to take a course on open education. Here I'm suggesting a nice one from a European project that Gigliola also knows. OpenMed is a course not only on open educational resources, is on open education. So you will read there many of the things that I've been presenting you. This course is fully open, so you can access it. You can access all the content without the need to do any activity, but you can take the full course experience, by just for free and whenever you want, and you can decide what to explore, also depending on your needs. Step 3, I suggest you spend half an hour exploring some OER repositories. I'm quoting a few here: the MetaFinder, OER Commons, Merlot. It's possibly the oldest one. It's from University of California, and it's very nice. You can see, you can get an understanding of how many open educational resources exist in your subject and the way you could use them. And the same is true for MOOCs platform. So you can see here the main MOOCs platform. We get Coursera, edX, Udacity, and so on. So is also worth to not just to take a MOOC, which is something always useful, so to understand how these courses are, but to explore all these platforms, to see the difference between one platform and the other. Then you could get inspired by existing open educators. Here, the link to the Open Game selection of practices that I was mentioning before, and to the OER world map, which is a map where you can just click on your country, or you can search by project, by expert, by area, or by country, or even city, to see which OER and open education related projects and initiatives exist around the world. last step, or last but one, think or at least know that many open tools exists. We know, we cannot go in detail, that the tools we typically use, including Twitter, including tools that have started in a nice and open way, are not open at all. So basically they do what they want with their data and so on. Whilst there exist a number of open tools that you can use here, and you can see them here, and actually these open tools work, I would say, exactly as the others. Google is always a bit better because it connects many things, but you might want to explore these things. These are ways to work, tools to work with your students in the open. Again, WordPress, Medium, Blogger, simple and open ways to create blogs, and as we said before, hypotheses or we notes to comment courses and documents. And it's important to know that these tools exist. And actually by using these tools, you also, again, give a message of openness. It's just, if you are, many people have declared themselves open educators, and then they share, they openly licensed resources as a PDF. And I would like to kill them because, if it's a PowerPoint and you are allowing me to use it, why do you transform it into a PDF, which is very difficult? Well, it's possible to be used, but I need to pay a license to Adobe to be able to use it. So to understand it's using open tools, it's also important. And last point, I suggest you connect or explore the work of open educational practitioners. Here I'm posting the blogs of a number of experts or leaders in the community. I see there most of those are men. We have just 3 women, actually, Lorna Campbell, Catherine Cronin, and Audrey Waters, but they are 3 fantastic researchers and activists. And by following, a few of these blogs, or just by reading what they are working on, you can really get an understanding of where the open education community is at the moment. So these 6 steps. Step 1, check your starting competencies. Step 2, take a course on open education. This course is pretty long, but again, you can decide to take part of it. Step 3, explore OER repositories. Step 4, explore MOOC platform. Step 3B, sorry. Step 4, get inspired by existing open educators. Check what others are doing. Step 5, try to see how open tools are working and how they could work for you. And step 6, explore and connect with open education practitioners.
Fabio, may I ask, well, a question?
Please.
It is a curiosity, really. In slide 34, you speak about get inspired by existing open educators. In your knowledge, is there any country that has a higher representation of open educators? And in case it is there any, let's say, educational policy that let's say promotes, or is there no link? It's just a kind of community-based inspiration. It's just because before you said that it's not that easy in traditional universities to become. And I was wondering, because I see different colors, so there are different numbers of practitioners there. Just
no, it's a very good question. So actually, I would say the Anglo-Saxon world, so Canada, the US, and the UK are probably, and a bit of Australia, New Zealand as well, are the countries where open educational resources, the debate about open educational resources started, and the MOOCs also movement started. Now, then Europe has followed. China is now very big with their own approach. Russia is doing a lot of work there. But I would say, if you have to look for the strongest communities there, the American community is quite active, the US community, even if in the last years they are going through some changes and identity issues. The Canadian community is very strong, and the UK community also is very strong. I suggest, if you have the time and when bloody COVID will be over, to a nice conference on open education. It's called OER and takes place every year in the UK, typically in London, but also in other cities. It's organized by ALT, and it has the name of the year. So the next one will be for sure OER 21. I'm putting it in the chat. Look for this conference. This conference is great because you can really see the community behind. So the UK community, not only British, but also Ireland is quite active and Scotland is quite active. You can really see it emerging from this conference. Now, the relation between policies and implementation is a difficult one. Think of Scotland, for example. In Scotland, there has been in Scotland, you have one university, which is the University of Edinburgh, which probably has, at least in Europe, the most advanced approach and policy on OER and open education. They don't only have a policy, but they have a team of people working only on open education and OER to train professors and so on. The lady before this, Lorna Campbell, here, the first in the list, is working in this team at Edinburgh University. Edinburgh is in Scotland, and in Scotland you have a rather active, even if not very big, but rather active grassroots community of people like Lorna and others who were able to develop a, I would say, crowded, developed policy called OER Scotland. This policy exists. The Minister of Education has never adopted officially this policy, which is actually a set of recommendations. And so actually at the moment in Scotland, you have a strong university, but you don't have any guidelines on this. Canada, for example, is an example where education is working at the province level. So you have some provinces like Ontario, for example, who are super advanced. You have regional, local policies that are commending universities to work with open educational resources and with open approaches. So the more you work with open educational resources, the more money you get from the government in terms. So as you can see, it's but I would say the top-down policy is not sufficient. We have other cases like Slovenia, for example, who launched this OER Slovenia policy, opening up Slovenia policy a few years ago. But if you then talk to universities there, this policy has not been able actually to change the way teaching takes place. So I think policy is important, but what is more important is the ecosystem. So if you really look for how things are happening in Canada, the culture there is pretty normal for them to share something openly. You know, it's common sense. You know, I've been developing this with public money, with taxpayers' money. So I'm just returning this piece of resources to taxpayers, and I don't really care if people can criticize me. I don't really care if nobody will look at it. I will have 0 views on YouTube. Who cares? You know, it's my duty to share this back with the community. I don't know if I replied to your question.
Yes, very well. Thank you very much.
But then just to talk about Italy a moment, you were mentioning before the Open Education Italia or Educazione Aperta community. Again, also in Italy, we created this group of practitioners, experts, professors, and I think it's Educazione. I'm putting here the link, educazioneaperta.eu. Have a look there. This again is a community of people, unstructured and without any legal entities, just an informal network of people working and interested in open educational approaches that are sharing things. And again, we've been talking to people in the different policy levels, and at different, there are different levels of maturity. So some universities are more mature in this. They have, they are including some open education instances in their strategies. Some others don't, but they have a few professors who are leading. So actually, it's really a composite ecosystem, I would say.
Thank you.
Now, I still have, if you want me to go, I still have 5 slides without any text, just to show you what I will leave you with. This is that famous to know more section. I'll take in 3 minutes. Things that you should be, I suggest to explore explore to get an understanding of how big and how important is this movement. The first thing is a State of the Commons report by Creative Commons. Here you can really have the understanding that the knowledge produced in the world is more and more getting open. Of course, it's not the norm yet, unfortunately, but you can see there how many and which institutions, including, for example, the White House, are using Creative Commons as their standard license, or actually CERN in Geneva. Everything there, everything that CERN is producing in terms of data and content is produced by law, by their decision through Creative Commons. Again, we spoke a few times about Wikipedia. I suggest you take 1 hour. I think this lasts 1 hour or 40 minutes to take the Wikipedia adventure. It's a game on Wikipedia, and after 1 hour, I guarantee you will feel part of the community and you will be able to actually work with Wikipedia. And it's actually quite fun. This is a nice publication by the European Commission with some guidelines on open education for academics, again, worth looking at. This is a nice course, open course, an example of an open course by the University of Edinburgh, which is not, you won't see OER there, this is not promoted as an OER, but it is an open course. Actually, everything there is openly released. It is an example of a very simple, low-tech course on digital teaching for university professors, which is a perfect example to me of an OER. Here you see an example of an open educational resources university. It is called OERU, and it is a university based on a network. It is a network of universities with the secretariat based in New Zealand. That guy there, Wayne McIntosh, is leading the whole thing. And it is a university who has been able to produce his first graduates through degrees solely based on open educational resources. So people take different courses from different universities of the network through OER online, and then go to one of these universities and get a degree for a 1-year master, or even for, I think, for a, let's say, 2 years master. So this seems to be working also at the system level. Again, the OER world map. And again, last slide, a nice quote by my friend Jim Groom. He's an American living in Italy, actually, living in Trento, one of the, I would say, most relevant figures in the open education movement. And actually, it is basically saying what I think is the most important thing. So openness is not about licenses, even if, of course, you need licenses to make things open, but it is about the ethos. So actually, if you are willing to work with your learners, considering them as a community, and you are brave enough to work with them in the open web and in open ways, actually, you will see that learning about licenses, learning about open resources, and learning how to do things is really simple. So it's not anything you need to learn in technical terms. It's mostly an attitude or an open ethos that you should try to pursue. I think